actual like father saying he's like, hey, I'm gonna give you a bunch of stuff, share it with all your friends, okay? And I'm like, okay, cool. But it just it was very interesting. But I remember talking to a bunch of people about it, and no one had really any solid answers. So that to me tells me, just in kind of like a parallel with the actual gathering, I don't think we're gonna have any solid answers on where actual like geographical locations, if there is any, are going to be like heavily populated with Reubens or heavily populated with Issachars or anything like that. I think it's just going to be, you know, certain areas will have it. People will come and people will go, especially with airplane travel. People can go across the country, within a couple hours. So I think it's just going to be a small, tedious thing that's going to come to pass.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Welcome to the last
How are you doing?
dispensation. Good.
Good.
This is Michael. It's Pachero. How do you pronounce your last name?
Pachero. So like Pachero.
Pachero. All right, Michael. Now, how did we meet? You want to tell the folks?
Yeah, so I work for a company called Endurance Group. We are a website hosting company. Called in asking you about a couple questions on how to build a website and how to get a website going. So talk to you about all that, gave you some product recommendations, stuff like that. And last dispensation kind of was a tipping point. I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of a member term when people use dispensation. It's not a very common term to use. So I was like, yeah, I'll talk to him about it. So
Yeah. And we got in a pretty interesting conversation. You intrigue me,
yeah.
my friend. You are from, if you don't mind saying it, what's one unique thing that sets you apart from a lot of other members of the church? Well,
Well,
let's say it's
there's
significant
a
amount.
couple. Yeah. um there's a few. So we got into a couple different discussions. The main one, I believe, was about the 12 tribes of Israel. I am of the tribe of Reuben, which isn't
Yes,
a
you
normal
are.
tribe to be called from. There's a slew of Enochs. There's a slew of Manassehs, but most of them are that. There's a couple different Judahs and people of the
Right.
tribe of Judah, but I'm the only Reuben that I've met so far. So
And Reuben was part of the
and
10
then I think the
Yeah, Reuben was part of the 10 tribes in the northern
correct, yes.
country.
So he was the firstborn um, of the entire tribes, because Joseph split into, I'm sorry, it was Ephraim, Manasseh, right? So
Right.
uh, Joseph split into those two, and then from there, Israel adopted those two into the 12 tribes. But the main 12, the main 10, Reuben was the beginning one, and then it had like others like Issachar, Gad, Dan. Uh, the ones that I know off the top of my head too much. I haven't researched a bunch, but
Yeah.
and then Joseph was the beloved one because he was given the coat and given the birthright and everything like that.
Yeah. Uh, and we can learn a lot about the tribes of Israel. Like President Nelson has been talking about it recently. I'd like to read a quote. He says, anytime you do anything that helps anyone on either side of the veil, take a step toward making covenants with God and receiving their essential baptismal and temple ordinances, you are helping to gather Israel. It is as simple as that. So it's not necessarily some extraordinary romanticized event like DNC, what is it? DNC 133. We can read a lot. I know I'm not
No, you're all good.
I'm not a scriptorian myself, but DNC 133 talks about the lost tribes coming back from the north. And as I'm learning things and gleaning things and reevaluating my mindset on the gathering of Israel, I didn't hear anything in President Nelson's talk about something cataclysmic like that. It's a gradual process. And Joseph Smith receiving that revelation could have been, there could have been some hyperbole there, wouldn't you say?
I could say that. I think the gathering of the 10 core, the 12 in total tribes is going to be definitely a cornerstone piece. So I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to physically see. I think it's going to
Right.
be something that will be identified, but it won't be a the second all the 12 tribes have been gathered. I don't think it's going to be like a giant cannon in the sky. It'd be like they've all gathered. It's more a very subtle sign, but I think it's going to be something that's very important. Um, and the main thing that I found interesting, and delving back into like when I found out when I was 19 years old when I had my patriarchal blessing, and during my blessing I was Ephraim. So during it, I remember him very vividly say, "You are the tribe of Ephraim," and then afterwards, he felt prompted to change it to Reuben, and he goes, "There will be many blessings that you'll have, and you'll have to share all these blessings with your brothers and sisters." And I was like, just like Heavenly Father, be an actual father saying, "It's like, hey, I'm gonna give you a bunch of stuff, share it with all your friends, okay?" And I'm like, okay, cool, but it just it was very interesting, but I remember talking to a bunch of people about it, and no one had really any solid answers. So that to me tells me, just in kind of like a parallel with the actual gathering, I don't think we're going to have any solid answers on where actual geographical locations, if there is any, are going to be like heavily populated with Reubens or heavily populated with Issachars or anything like that. I think it's just going to be, you know, certain areas will have it, people will come and people will go, especially with airplane travel. People can go across the country, within a couple hours. So I think it's just going to be a small, tedious thing that's going to come to pass. Oop, I lost you.
Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me?
There you go. I can now.
In other words, subtle but great.
Yes.
Let me read 133 verses. Let me start at verse 22. This is when Joseph Smith received that revelation. There's different, I've done two different videos on this. I did one about a year ago before I really started researching a lot more about the 12 tribes of Israel. But let me read this, and it it kind of relates to what you were what you were kind of spelling out there. Let me read this real quick, starting at 22. And it shall be a voice as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, which shall break down the mountains, and the valleys shall not be found. We're kind of doing that now with social media.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? And you were talking about
Airplane
airplanes, and
travel and
yeah, we're more
just
networked as an
yeah.
earth, as a world. Let me continue reading. And he shall command the great deep, and it shall be driven back into the north countries, and the islands shall become one land. And the land of Jerusalem and the land of Zion shall be turned back into their own place, and the earth shall be like as it was in the days before it was divided. Here's the part that I'm talking. So we know that the continents are going to come back together. That's really going to happen when
Mhm.
the Savior comes. But here's the part where I think there might be, I'm just speculating. This isn't gospel, but according to the gospel of Jesus Christ, but this is gospel according to the last dispensation, let's just say. But
Right.
and they who are in the north country shall come in remembrance before the Lord, and their prophets shall hear his voice, and shall no longer stay themselves, and they shall smite the rocks, and the ice shall flow down at their presence. Now, in the past, there's been a lot. Joseph Smith received that revelation. There's no doubt. I don't know if he had time, and maybe he did. I haven't researched much about what Joseph Smith expounded on this, but how much he had time to interpret what he received. But right here in verse 27, and in highways shall be cast up in the midst of the great deep, and their enemies shall become a prey unto them. And in the barren deserts there shall come forth pools of living water, and the parched ground shall no longer be thirsty land. It goes on, but it sounds to me like what's going on now, right? That's kind of what you were saying.
I agree. There's another interesting part with that too. So Isaiah, he saw the entire future, and he was the one that was, artistically able to paint everything in his own words, and people were trying to interpret it and everything like that. I very strongly feel like Joseph Smith had a lot of the same interpretations because of the things that he just could not comprehend that he had seen. Um, Highways, deserts being filled with water that they aren't barren. We have machinery now. We have things that would blow people's minds, and it is so big and so vast that we can do so much with it, right? A helicopter, for instance, can change the entire world. Just one small helicopter flight, fly it via helicopter, fly it to the Gobi Desert. All right, well that's prophecy right there. No longer will it be barren because that one bucket of water was placed in the desert. Now that's very, very um, very small example of that, but take that and macromize it. You're gonna have so many different things. I lost you again. Sorry. The sound's cutting out.
You're probably going to lose me a couple times, but it actually
Okay.
turns out better. It looks better when it's exported or when it's
Okay, cool.
downloaded.
Just
Yeah.
just making sure.
So just keep on talking. I
Will
hope
do.
that my son's a gamer, so he might be like bogging down the internet right now.
And my children are watching Dora the Explorer right now, so that could be what's causing that too. So
That's okay. But yeah, there's when I say hyperbole, that's exactly what I'm saying is that, the highways have is that the internet, you know?
oh
Um,
yeah, that's another good one. Internet's going to cause so much more communication. And there was a show that it was focusing on like the dark ages and bringing everything back, and it was focused on bringing back inventions that we would have us as opposed to like that we would have now as opposed to then. And communication is such a huge thing that they didn't have back then. To get a letter from one part of the country to another part of the country would take days, weeks, months, and if you had instant communication like we do now, it's that can change wars, it can change lands, it can change so much just
right.
by having instant communication. Social media is a tool in and of itself. It's moved mountains, and it's changed how we interact as a species. I think
That's
that's
right.
just an amazing invention that I don't think anyone would have dreamed of back in the day.
Right. Yeah, barren deserts, living water, and they shall bring forth their rich treasures unto the children of Ephraim. Look at General Conference. This is not a Utah church anymore. It's not a United States church anymore. It kind of went through phases. First, it was a
Hmm.
Utah church, then it was a United States church, and then South America started flourishing in the Asian countries. Now it's global. And in a sense, aren't they
Oh yeah.
bringing their rich treasures? Could be their talents,
Hmm.
their gifts. They're bringing things to the table. They're bringing their languages, their cultures, their beauty, you know. So I see the gathering of Israel as something a lot greater than some of our early general authorities in their limited understanding, because we can you hear me?
I did. I served in Everett, Washington. I was mainly it's funny. My mission, I say most of it was in Ferndale and Bellingham. for Noah Blaine specifically. I was in the same church building for a year, my mission, which is kind of funny, but it was all like split up during the actual mission. But yeah, I went to Everett, Washington, and loved it. It's amazing.
That's cool. Do you have any stories about your mission? Anything that stands out? Anything about the geography? Something that maybe built your testimony stronger? Any stories? Anything like that?
Um, really, the main thing that I loved about my memory, like that's certain. It's like, oh, I loved how it changed me as a person without me even realizing it.
That's okay.
Um,
That's good too.
I it right? It's funny though. Like, so I'm from Arizona. I'm in Arizona. I've lived in Arizona. I'll probably live in Arizona the rest of my life, and I love it. Love the heat. People are calling me crazy, my wife including, in that group. But uh, I love the heat. And when I got to Washington, I remember I walked outside, and I had been in Utah for 3 weeks in the MTC, right? And I walked outside, and it was cold and wet, and just went straight through every single layer of clothing I had and just hit my bone. I was like, oh, I don't like this. It's so cold. And like the first week of my mission, where I was just shivering constantly, was wearing like 4 layers of clothing everywhere, long johns on, and trainer who had been out for like a year and a half is like, "You're ridiculous. You look ridiculous." I was like, "I'm so cold all the time." And then I remember at the very end of my mission, um, I was in a short sleeve shirt. Like if I had a long sleeve shirt, I'd roll it up like this because I would just get so hot all the time. And this was end of December, or beginning of December, so it was cold. And I was like, listen, we got to go. We had too much to do. Let's just get, like, I have a suit coat on. If it got really cold, I get a sweater, put the suit coat on. But I was like, we just got to go. We got things to do. Come on, let's go. And my companion, who was out for like 3 months, was from St. George, and he
Uh,
had like long johns. He had a couple sweaters on, mittens, two pairs of gloves, and World War II trench jacket type of thing. I was like, bro, we gotta go. But it was just funny. But the main thing, like my travels throughout the mission, that was like the big thing that stuck out to me, is like I changed physically. Like I got thicker blood and everything like that. But
yeah.
um as a person, it really let me grow up and become more thoughtful about the organization of the church, and actually like what we do. I wasn't crazy active growing up until, I want to say, I wasn't extremely active from about 15 to 18 and a half, I'd say. Like there was some just people in certain wards I just didn't get along with, and they didn't get along with me, and they would come on and off, and I would come on and off, and it just
Yeah.
it just didn't mesh well.
What
So
was that in
once I got
Arizona?
back into like actual activity and stuff like that, I was there in Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there
Okay.
was a couple different characters here that just I didn't mesh very much with. But um, like I haven't talked to him in years, so I could probably get along with him now. But
Well, of
just
course.
during that time, yeah, just normal kid stuff, I would say, and like normal teenage drama and whatnot. But after I got real, who's the elders quorum? Like, what's an elders quorum? And he's like, what do you mean? Didn't you ever go to elders quorum? I was like, no, I don't think I did. What is that? He's like, so he had to sit down and explain everything to me, and I was like, when did all of this happen? When did all this organization happen? He's like, it's been this way for like ever. And I was like, okay. And I had to like think about what like a laurel was. I had no idea what a laurel was, or a beehive, or I knew deacon, teacher, priest, because that's what I was like during that time. I would come and I'd go to that, but no idea what an elders quorum, high priest group leader, none of that. Had no idea what it was. So it really allowed me to like view the organization of the church and how we did it, and it was really really cool to me. So I was like learning a bunch of different stuff all over again.
Yeah. Well, that's one good thing about going on a mission is you learn the auxiliaries of the church, you learn how the church operates, you learn the structure of the church. I like the fact there's a lot more sisters going out now, so they're understanding. Um, it's not like it was when I was on a mission in the early 90s, and in, even in the 80s I remember it was every worthy male go on a mission. Now it's kind of, well, and then about maybe
Mm,
10 years ago it was either go in the military or go on a mission. Now I would say about half the membership only go on missions now,
right.
and a lot of them are sisters.
I
It's amazing.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more sisters.
Yeah.
A lot more sisters, which is I think is great because sisters have a way of communicating that just a goofy 18, 19-year-old kid
Right.
such as I probably would never have been able to. I don't know what it is, but sisters are able to empath just a little bit more, I think. So I think that helps quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, and don't feel bad because I went in and out of activity growing up too. But I remember going into the backyard when I was 12 or 13, and I had one of those old gospel principles books, and I didn't know much about my religion, and I said, "Okay."
Mhm.
I had this thirst, this hunger, and I could fill this void because my parents weren't active. And I remember reading that book, sitting back there in the summertime and sitting in a lawn chair and reading gospel principles from cover to cover, and just and then the miracle forgiveness. That's a very interesting book because the first half of it is very hardcore, and you feel like there's no hope for you. And then you read the second half and it's all about mercy.
And that, yeah, we were actually told not to read that on our mission because a lot of missionaries, after they read it, they got sent home because they felt they weren't worthy enough.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah, it
was
was
a
pretty
banned book on
hardcore.
our mission, believe it or not.
Imagine reading that when you're 13
Uh,
years old.
oh gosh, yeah, no, that can be that would be heart wrenching, I'd imagine. I never had the opportunity to read it. I want to, but I just now with kids, I have very little time to read anymore. But I remember when I was about 14, 15, I had a really hard day and I wasn't going to church, I don't think at the time. But so my mom and dad are divorced. They've been divorced ever since I was a real little kid, like 6 months old, little type of thing. So I never knew them together. But uh, my dad's not a member. My dad and side, they're all strong Italian Roman Catholics type of thing. And then my mom's side is where all the members are, and we go all the way back to Hiram Smith. So
Wow.
like we got some cool heritage on both sides. But
That is cool.
uh, my yeah, it's actually a funnier story. My namesake comes from one of, I believe he was a Kappa back in the Italian mob back in the day.
Oh,
So like hanging out with Al Capone and everything like that,
yeah.
he would my great uncle Johnny, who was or no, I'm sorry, no, he was my great grandfather Johnny, would say, hey, listen, your shop needs insurance, and then my namesake, his brother, would come in, Mikey, and would smash a few things up, and the people are like, you're right, I do need insurance. So that's where my namesake came from.
Protection
But
money. They called that
uh,
protection money.
then I said, insurance is a great thing. It's a
Yeah.
great thing to have, just in case things go south. But yeah, no, it's protection money. But it's funny if you've ever seen the movie Mobsters and Mormons. That's like
Yeah.
a personified example of that. So, um, but that was that side. So I always grew up with the church, like I knew it. I knew a lot of the general stuff, but I always had a book when I started reading and I just felt better and was like, huh, okay, cool. And I remember I was a very rambunctious child. I would get up at like 5 o'clock a.m. every single day without skipping a beat. So my grandma, who was raised on a farm, got up with me, and she's like, well, what can we do to shut Michael up? So I genius, let's read scripture. So I learned, I had like a college grade reading level by age 5, 6, because my grandma's like, just, you got to be quiet, just read these. And she would teach me how to read during that time. So like I owed all to her for my reading skills right now, but she's she had the patience of a saint, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Yeah. I had good grandparents too. Um, I wanted to ask you what, how do you hear him? I asked that a lot of, I've been asking that to a lot of people because of President Nelson and what he's been asking us to do. But what does personal revelation mean to you?
Um, usually it's a kick in the head, and I say that very lovingly, but uh, I'll usually get a prompting or something that's usually very clear, but it's not a, like people say, oh, it's a still small voice. It's usually in my inner monologue. Like I'll have my inner monologue in my head that sounds like my voice, right? And it's usually something that just pops in my mind, and very funny personal story for you. So I was walking, so I was in the singles ward, and I was 22, 21, 22. And I remember we went on this like night hike, which in retrospect was a very, very bad idea in Arizona because rattlesnakes are a thing. And I don't know what the bishop was thinking, but it's like, yeah, let's go on a night hike. And I was actually pursuing this other girl, and I'll leave her name out, but I was pursuing this other girl, and I was like, hey, do you want to go on a date? Do you want to? And she eventually said yes, and that didn't lead anywhere at all, which is funny. But during that time, I went up to the top of the mountain. I was like, hey, do you want to go out? And she was like, yeah, sure, why not? And then she went off with her friends, and I went on with mine, and I was uh, going down the mountain, and there was one part which was very like loose gravel, and I remember sliding, and there was a girl behind me that slid, and I was like, oh, don't worry, I'll catch you. And she goes, where were you the past 30 times, like it just as a joke. And I remember walking, and then all of a sudden in my head I hear, I wonder if she's my future wife. And I shrugged it off and kept walking.
Wow.
Well, lo and behold, months later, at that point in time, I met this girl over hot chocolate. I said, man, I was like, man, these cups feel weird. They were like insulated cups. I was like, these cups feel weird. And she goes, yeah, they do. I was like, well, my name's Michael. What's your name? And that's how it got started. So like we technically met on a mountain, but I had that one little thing in there saying, what if she's your future wife? And like that was such a random thought, and I just shrugged it off and didn't even think about it. So it's usually a kick in the head, like just something that's like,
Yeah.
here's a thought that's type of inspiration. So I gotta get better on like getting that up, like bringing that to the surface more, but it happens randomly. So
Well, was she LDS? Did she happen to be LDS?
yeah, yeah,
Really?
it was a singles word activity.
Oh, I thought you just
So
met her in a random place. I'm sorry. I didn't
no,
catch
no, no,
that part.
it was
Okay.
on a, no, yeah, it was a singles word activity. It was funny. We had been in overlapping friend groups for the past like 6 months before we met, but
Uh-huh.
just wasn't the right time. And then eventually we met. It was funny. There was one night we had a mutual friend that was supposed to introduce us, and her, I'll say her name. Her name is Megan. She's
Uh-huh.
like, "Hey, Michael, I have this really cool girl. I think you should meet because I think she would think you're really funny because a lot of people don't apparently." And so she's like, "Yeah, just stay here. I'll bring him over there, right over there." I was like, "Cool." And I remember I got like a phone call or something, and I just walked off, and they're like, "Wow, what a rude guy," you know? And I felt bad. I was like, "Oh, sorry, I had no idea. I don't know what happened." So um yeah, you were supposed to meet that night, but instead we met on a mountain. And uh she said that she knew, like we had a friend group. I was part of a friend group when we were very like uh like outgoing. Like we had a bunch of different stuff going within the ward. We were kind of the popular group, and she's like, I didn't want to necessarily get into that, but then this guy Michael came into my life, and I guess I had to be thrown into it. So, but
That's awesome. I love it.
can't blame her.
That's right. And we all have to work on it too. I know you said that you wish you were better at bringing it to the surface, or listening to the still small voice. I think that's something we all have to do, is all of our lives, is learn how to discipline ourselves to. Joseph Smith always said to follow the spirit. When you feel that prompting, and I've heard that from other priesthood leaders, when you
Mm-hmm.
feel prompted to follow the Holy Ghost, you need to have the courage to follow it. And I think that's the easy part, is hearing the voice. The hard part is recognizing it,
It's
I believe.
acting and
Yeah.
recognizing. Yep.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. There have been times in my life where 100% I heard the voice and knew what I needed to do, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. One of them was with one of my converts. I had a prompting, and it's like, these are the words that you need to say, and I was like, that makes absolutely no sense. Why would I say that? And I kept getting it, and I got the final impressions like, do it or this will never happen again. I was like, all right, cool. So I immediately said it, and she ended up getting baptized. I was like, okay, cool, but that's terrifying for me. I don't like that feeling. I don't like
Yeah.
the spirits constraining me so much to the point where it's like, you say it or I'll never be in your life again. I was like, fine, I'll say it, But
Hey,
I did like that. So
well, you're definitely
uh,
it sounds like you're definitely a conduit of someone that hears him and feels the spirit, because I've had a few things like that happen even on my mission. I remember riding my bike with my companion, and I had a prompting to go see somebody in our ward that we were covering, and come to find out they had two kids that needed to be baptized. But it was just we didn't even I didn't even know that they were I know that we met them one time. They had come to church once,
mhm.
and I just those following that spirit, that still small voice. And it's not so much an audible voice, is it? It's more of an impression in the mind.
It's very much an impression. It's I've had thoughts come to mind. I have had a voice happen where it's my voice or a different voice, but mainly it's very much just a way of thinking, just again an impression. It's like, oh, this
Right.
is like if I'm thinking about X, just a Y interval comes in. It's like, oh, I wonder. Let's investigate that. So it's very subtle in its approach.
Right.
So it's very interesting.
Well, brother Pachiro, thank you
Yeah.
so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And
Yeah.
do you have a YouTube channel yourself?
I don't have any type of YouTube
Okay.
channel, any social media, anything like that. It's funny. I tend to stay off of it as much as I can, especially now. It's just too depressing. But I don't really have anything to like plug or promote. But I
No.
would say follow this Last Dispensation. It's a pretty good YouTube channel, from what I understand and from what I've seen. So,
Thank
but
you.
yeah, definitely. I would say this: look into um, different forms of gospel that have been put out by the brethren. My favorite, Jesus the Christ, exceptional book, love it.
Yeah.
Different books by different prophets and everything like that. I think you'll find a lot of revelation buried in there on top of just the core scriptures as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries. You have yourself a good day. Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.